On a cold and dark night in early 1993, on a lonely stretch of highway outside of Moxee, Washington, an unidentified man was out walking alone in the middle of the roadway as cars blew past him at over 55 miles an hour. As you can probably guess, things didn't go so well for him that night. But without any belongings or identification on him, he remained a John Doe for over a decade, until a new lead broke the whole case wide open, revealing his true identity after 11 long years. However, this only ended up leading to more questions than answers. Welcome back to episode 25 of your favorite podcast. My name is Nate, and with me again is one of my co-hosts, Kyle. Kyle, where the hell have you been, man? Ivan and I, we almost had to do an entire episode about your disappearance.
Yeah, I did do a quick little disappearing act. I actually moved. I've been in the process of moving lately, and I finally landed in a new spot. And I would like to apologize to our listeners beforehand. Nate and I have been experiencing some technical difficulties getting my little mobile studio set up in my new spot. So if the audio quality isn't up to snuff like it normally is, I apologize. That's on my end.
Yeah, it is. It's all your fault, man.
It is all my fault. You can point the blame straight at me. All your hate mail for this episode, right to Kyle.
Yeah. So where did you go? You moved out of state, I heard.
Yes,
you don't
I
have
did.
You don't have to tell me the exact state, but I heard that you moved out of California finally.
Yes, I did. Like way out of California. Like
way out of California.
Some odd miles out of California.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to take a moment to kind of defend ourselves as displaced Californians, because it was actually people from your hometowns and cities that moved into our hometowns, and that's the reason why we got displaced in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. It made everything worse.
This is all because people from your hometowns listened to too many Red Hot Chili Peppers songs and started driving the Californians out of California. And now it just comes full circle. You reap what you sow, and now you're stuck living with Kyle as your neighbor forever.
That's right.
Or someone that's Kyle adjacent. Or someone that's Kyle adjacent. And this is a guy who uses a pink shoelace as a belt, drives a Subaru, and plays his bass guitar without any regard for his neighbors.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of pink, I also replaced my pick guard with a pink pick guard, and I replaced my strings with bright neon pink strings.
That's really interesting, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, it goes right along with the pink shoelace.
Do you still wear that, by the way?
No. No, I got a little too fat for the pink shoelace.
Right on, man. Well, I didn't. Anyway, all right, man. So what can our dear listeners do to support us as we move into their hometowns and ruin them?
Well, as our listeners know, the holidays are here. So I think now would be a good time to maybe write a little note that says, listen to Super Mystery Bros in your annual Christmas cards that you send out to the people that never read them. Or maybe scribble it onto a small gift you're going to drop into some kid's stocking for Christmas.
Buy some of those like USB thumb drives and just like load a bunch of our episodes onto it and hand them out as stocking stuffers.
Perfect stocking stuffer. Nothing spreads holiday cheer quite like spreading the word about this amazing podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as always, to recover the basics, our listeners can always leave us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Feel free to drop us a line at our website, supermysterybrospodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow our brand new Instagram at supermysterybros. And you can even visit our website at www.supermysterybrospodcast.com.
Wow, that sounds really professional, man. All right, let's get started on this episode, shall we?
Let's go.
According to NamUs, which is the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database, more than 600,000 people in the US go missing every single year, and about 4,400 unidentified bodies are recovered. Fortunately, some turn up on their own, having disappeared voluntarily, or through some sort of misunderstanding. Some disappear without a trace, never to be seen or heard from again, having succumbed to some kind of uncertain fate. Perhaps they met with a horrible end, or perhaps they simply wanted to disappear and never be found again. And some, like the gentleman we're going to be discussing tonight, disappear in bizarre circumstances and are found amid even more bizarre circumstances, which ends up raising more questions than answers. Could you be next? Stay tuned to find out.
Tonight, we begin our story late into the chilly evening of February 1st, 1993, on a semi-rural stretch of State Route 24 in Yakima County, Washington. At around 10:30 p.m., as temperatures hovered just above freezing and the passing headlights of motor vehicles on the highway lit up the evening mist which hung motionless over the highway, an unnamed motorist was driving through the area when suddenly, out of nowhere, they nearly struck a man who was walking down the center line of the highway. Out of concern for the man's safety, they stopped shortly up ahead, flipped a bitch, and headed back in the opposite direction in order to warn other motorists. However,
Hold on.
Yes.
I just want to note here that I couldn't find any reliable sources for the exact location of where the man was or which direction that he was walking in. But Wikipedia said that it was near the intersection of SR 24 and Rivered Road. So I just want to make that clear before we move on. I could only find it on Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt.
However, as the driver made their way back in the direction where they last saw the man, they were shocked and horrified by what they saw. The man was now laying crumpled by the side of the road, completely motionless from an apparent hit and run committed by another vehicle. They had witnessed a Chevy Camaro driving off in the opposite direction, but it's unclear to investigators whether this was the car that killed the man. The perpetrator of this hit and run has never been identified to this day. Police and first responders quickly arrived on the scene and unfortunately pronounced the man dead at the scene. Adding to the apparent poor judgment of the act of walking down the center of the highway in the middle of the night in the pitch darkness, the man was wearing a military-style camouflage fatigues with brown boots, further concealing him amongst the backdrop of the surrounding Washington state woodlands. The autopsy performed on the body confirmed that the man had not been intoxicated at the time, either by alcohol or drugs. In fact, no known narcotics were found in his system at all. Suffice to say, the autopsy also confirmed that his cause of death were the injuries sustained from being struck by a vehicle at high speed. However, the man was not carrying any form of identification on him, and so the police were unable to conclusively ID him. He became known to local law enforcement as Moxee John Doe.
All right, so let's just break this down real quick. So February 1st, 1993, on the highway that's running next to Moxee, Washington, there was a man that was seen walking down the middle of the highway in the pitch black by some passing motorist. And they were concerned for the guy's safety, so they made a U-turn and headed back to make sure that he was okay. But by the time that they got back, he was just laying crumpled dead on the side of the road, victim of an apparent hit and run. And there was like a Camaro that was seen driving away from the scene. I mean, it was probably some driver. He's reaching down below the passenger seat to grab their Steely Dan mixtape, and then bam, out of nowhere, they just hit this poor guy going at full speed down the highway. And so they assumedly just panicked and drove off. My auntie used to have like an 80s era Camaro, and those things are built like fucking tanks. You could probably smash through a cow and not even notice.
Yeah, most 80s vehicles were, they were very boxy. A lot of them steel frame, steel body parts. Yeah. So yeah, unlike, today's Camaro, if it struck a human being, even at 30 miles an hour, that Camaro wouldn't be driving anywhere.
It'd be like a Coors can.
Yeah. Yeah. This is also a good time to point out, the politeness and common courtesy that people have. These people in the middle of the night stop on the highway and turn around to go warn other drivers about some knucklehead walking down the freeway. Whereas if this was in California and you saw that, all you would do is be like, look at that fucking moron, and you'd keep going on about your evening.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be like, yeah, just another Tuesday, some tweaker walking down the highway, whatever.
Yeah. Yep. See it every week.
Yeah. However, dear listener, the story would not end here. The man would subsequently be buried in Washington and go completely unidentified. That is, until 11 years later, in 2004, when a break was made in the case. According to the Doe Network, a Washington State Patrol investigator named Pat Ditter was inspired by a 2003 Seattle Post-Intelligencer series that critiqued law enforcement handling of missing persons cases titled Without a Trace. Detective Sergeant Ken Harcum of the State Patrol's Yakima office said, quote, "The series got Pat thinking, if it can be wrong there, it can be wrong here, and he began looking at the 1993 hit and run," end quote. Ditter, who was a 13-year veteran at the time, with a reputation for tenacity and attention to detail, focused on part of the series that dealt with the unreliability of the NCIC, which is the National Crime Information Center, computer hits. Why not think outside the box, he reasoned. Why not try Google? Quote, Pat is very computer savvy, and after reading that, he thought about doing an extensive search on Google instead. He put in details like height, weight, that took him to missing persons sites, end quote, Harcum said. Within a week, Ditter had what expensive law enforcement databases were unable to find for years, a list of possible victims. One website from the Doe Network and the Texas Department of Public Safety Missing Persons Clearinghouse that he stumbled upon contained a picture of a man missing from Texas that strongly resembled Moxee John Doe. However, there was one distinct difference. The man in the photo was wearing large, thick, double-bridged eyeglasses in the photo, while Moxee John Doe was not. However, doing his due diligence, Ditter retrieved the evidence that was found at the scene and searched the clothing that he was wearing, and voila, found the eyeglasses in one of the pockets of the clothing. The missing man who Ditter now suspected was Moxee John Doe was a man by the name of David Glenn Lewis from Amarillo, Texas, who vanished from his home just the day prior to his death on January 31st, 1993. Ditter phoned the Amarillo Police Department and later forwarded to them for DNA analysis one of the hit-and-run victim's boots and a tissue sample preserved since 1993. Lewis's mother, Ezra Lewis, provided DNA samples. The University of North Texas Health Science Center began to examine them. Ditter learned that Lewis was 39 years old when he disappeared 1,600 miles away in Amarillo, and that Lewis's wife, Karen, reported him missing a day after he failed to come home. The same day that John Doe was found near Moxee, east of Yakima. Lewis's brother Larry praised Ditter's persistence, stating that, quote, "If he hadn't looked at those cases, we would still be back at square one, thinking he's alive and gonna give us a call one of these days. He did an excellent job," end quote. And with that, the mystery was finally solved, and the family had all the answers they were waiting for over the last 11 years. Right?
Wrong. Although the identity of Moxee Joe Don was finally discovered
Moxee Joe Don.
Did I say Moxee Joe Don?
Yeah, you did.
Let's start this over. Although the identity of Moxee John Doe was finally discovered in 2004, it raised more questions than it answered. David Glenn Lewis had no connection to the state of Washington, and he allegedly knew nobody who lived there. He vanished from his home in Amarillo, Texas, and ended up struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver in Moxee, Washington, over 1,600 miles away. But how? And why? Little is known about David on a personal level, but this is what we do know about him. David Glenn Lewis was born on December 11th, 1953 in Borger, Texas, which is just northeast of Amarillo in the Texas Panhandle. It's a small town that only has about 12,500 residents as of the 2020 census. He graduated magna cum laude from Texas Tech U in 1975 with a degree in political science before then pursuing a higher degree in law, obtaining a Juris Doctor degree in 1979. By 1982, he would marry a woman named Karen, and just a year later, the two would have their first and only child together, a daughter named Lauren. In 1986, he would become an elected judge at the Moore County Court at Law, but would leave this position 4 years later to run for district court judge of the 69th District. However, he was unsuccessful and had to go back to practicing private law. Little is published about David, but from what we can tell, he was described as a charitable, religious person who was active in his local church. On top of being a lawyer and a judge, he also taught a government class at a local community college in Amarillo.
Yeah, so just to emphasize here real quick, this guy was not just some run-of-the-mill tweaker, bum, riffraff that got hit by a car. This was a guy who is probably in the top 1% echelon of our society in multiple different categories. Just highly successful, highly educated, highly intelligent. And it's really not a joke for me to say, probably pillar of the community.
Yeah, being involved in your local church in a small town, being an elected judge, in towns much smaller than you and I are from. Yep. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Disappears and gets hit by a car in the complete opposite side of the country about 24 hours after he was last seen in Amarillo. Just some crazy, wild and crazy stuff. All right, so let's get down to the details that surrounded David's initial disappearance. On January 28th of 1993, which was a Thursday, David left work early, stating that he wasn't feeling well. However, he did make a charge to his credit card at a gas station that afternoon and still taught his class at the local community college that night. The following day, Friday, the 29th of January, David's wife Karen and daughter Lauren left their home, which was located in Amarillo, to head to Dallas for a weekend of shopping. So I just want to note that this would be about 366 miles one way, according to Google, which would take about 5.5 hours, which is pretty crazy just to go do some shopping. But David was planning to stay home for the weekend, having already decided that he wanted to stay home and watch Super Bowl XXVII, which means 27 to those of you who flunked algebra, which was scheduled for Sunday the 31st, where the AFC champions, the Buffalo Bills, would face off against David's favorite team, the NFC champions, the Dallas Cowboys, to settle the score over, which side was the better team. Spoiler alert, the Cowboys ended up annihilating the Bills 52-17.
It was a great game. It was one of the best Super Bowls I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
No. I don't remember Super Bowl in 1993. I was 5.
Yeah, I don't know. If the Chargers weren't playing, I probably wasn't interested.
Yeah, well, as far as I know, they've never been to a Super Bowl.
Oh, they did, but they got annihilated by the 49ers.
Just like the last time the Padres went to the World Series.
Yeah. All right, so late into the evening of the 31st, again, Super Bowl Sunday, Karen and their daughter Lauren came home from their weekend shopping trip and noticed that David wasn't home. The TV was still on and the VCR was still recording the channel that the Super Bowl had been on. Stranger yet, his wedding ring and his watch were on the kitchen counter, and 2 turkey sandwiches had been made and placed into the refrigerator. The two kind of shrugged it off and assumed that David was working late at his office or he had decided to go watch the Super Bowl somewhere else that evening. However, mild apprehension turned to fear for Karen when, the next day, February 1st, she learned that David had missed 2 work-related appointments that were scheduled for him, which was very out of character. She immediately called the Amarillo police to report him missing. So, can you break that down for all of our listeners who might be confused by all that information?
Yeah, it is a lot of information. So, in a nutshell, right, this guy who not only top 1% of, human beings as far as, what you do with your life is concerned, I'm sure that he and his family in the area they live in, they're to the top 1% of the 1% as far as wealth goes. So it's not surprising that his wife and daughter take a weekend trip to Dallas just to go shopping, right? Mm-hmm. But they come home expecting to find their husband, is done watching the Super Bowl game. However, he's not there. And the next day, he still isn't there, and he has missed some appointments, which, being a hardcore professional that he is super unlike him. So they all start freaking out. They leave that Saturday. I think they left that Saturday.
No, they left on Friday.
Yeah, they left on Friday. They come home Sunday night after Super Bowl is wrapped up and the TV's still on, but no dad, no husband. He's just vanished into thin air. And they don't think anything of it because he's a busy man, probably not unlike him to even get back to work even after watching the Super Bowl. But next morning, he's still not there and he's missed a couple of appointments. They really start to worry.
Yeah, and then they call the Amarillo police and report him missing. So,
yes.
Why don't you continue on with our story, man?
Yes, sir. On January 29th, which was Friday, a family friend from their local church reportedly spotted David running through a Southwest Airlines terminal at the Amarillo airport with no luggage. The day prior to the Super Bowl, Saturday, January 30th, $5,000 had been deposited into the Lewis family bank account, but the identity of the person who deposited the money could not be established and remains unknown to this day. However, it was probably David. This is also the last day where anyone who knew David had seen him alive, as the neighbors recall seeing his red Ford Explorer in the driveway of their home on this day. January 31st, Super Bowl Sunday, police found out that the VCR had been left on to record the game, but it was never manually stopped. It kept on recording well after the game had already ended, presumably indicating that David had left the home sometime between the start of the recording and the end of the game. Just to clarify, especially for our younger listeners, this was not a VCR that could be programmed to automatically start. It's not like a DVR. You have to be there when you want to start recording your program and actually get your butt off your couch and walk to the device and push record at the moment you want to start recording. So someone had to be in the home, whether it was David or someone else actually manually started recording the Super Bowl that day.
Yeah, it was one of those VCRs that, just blinked at 12 o'clock forever and you could never get it to program.
Yeah. But hey, you know what? Those things ran forever. My dad recorded, I think, every single episode of MASH ever on one of those.
Oh my God.
Nothing from inside of the family home seemed to be missing or out of place, except for a pair of green sweatpants that belonged to David. According to the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, that's
the name of it.
Interesting name. Yeah. On Tuesday, February 2nd, police found David's vehicle, a red Ford Explorer, parked in front of the Potter County Courts building, which was located in downtown Amarillo. His house keys, along with his car keys, were found hidden underneath one of the floor mats. His checkbook, credit cards, and driver's license were inside where he normally kept them. However, there was no sign of David anywhere. Karen Lewis also told police that her husband's life had been threatened and she feared foul play. So did his family, who described Lewis as caring and involved in charity work.
Yeah, so I couldn't find anything specific in regards to any sort of threats made. It was just kind of like this vague allegation that Karen made.
Well, it's not surprising if you're a judge.
Yeah.
Your job is to send lawbreakers away. It's not surprising at all to get threats on your life, your families, and whatnot.
That's true. That is true. But I would like to know more about what these threats actually were. But anyway, here's something that it just fucking baffled me. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand the logic of this, no matter which way you look at this. So police discovered that plane tickets were bought under Lewis's name on January 31st, which was Super Bowl Sunday, that were from Dallas to Amarillo. And there was another flight that was purchased under his name from Los Angeles to Dallas on February 1st, which was the day of his death. But for the life of me, this just does not make sense, because if he was traveling from his home in Amarillo to Dallas and then somewhere out west, it would mean that he was like purchasing tickets in the opposite direction of where he was traveling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. The only way to explain that would be either he purchased a ticket from Dallas to LA under a false name, or he was warped by the Enterprise over there or something. Something interesting I found that only a couple places touched on. It also doesn't make sense, but that second ticket from LA to Dallas had a stopover in his hometown of Amarillo.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense.
No,
Wait,
it doesn't.
Does it?
Nah. I don't think so, because you're still missing that gap from Dallas to LA.
Ah, shit. That is weird. Maybe we can talk about that later.
All right.
Yeah, so like I could totally get it if he bought tickets from Amarillo to Dallas and then from Dallas to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But on Super Bowl Sunday, he bought a plane ticket from Dallas to Amarillo. And then the next day on February 1st, he bought a ticket from Los Angeles to Dallas. Like logically, that's buying tickets in like the opposite sequence.
So something I never quite got straight. Did he buy those tickets on those dates? Or did he buy those tickets ahead of time?
Those are the dates when he purchased the tickets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So same day flight tickets.
Yeah. So like I'd actually cross-check multiple different sources to make sure that I was understanding it correctly. And yeah, like January 31st, he bought a ticket from Dallas to Amarillo. And then the next day from Los Angeles to Dallas.
Okay.
I could be completely misinterpreting this, but I couldn't wrap my brain around why he would be purchasing plane tickets in the opposite sequence. Is weird. Right? Yeah, so to this day, nobody can say for certain why he purchased these tickets or if David was the one who purchased them at all, and if he was on board any of these planes, because at the time, domestic flights didn't require any ID prior to boarding. So, we don't even know which flights, if any, he was actually on.
Yeah, or if he was even the one who bought the tickets, or if someone else just used his name to purchase the tickets.
Right. Again, a friend of the family who attended the same church as David came forward and said that she saw David hurrying through the Southwest Airlines terminal at Amarillo's airport, and he wasn't carrying any luggage on Friday, January 29th. Also, there was a taxi cab driver that later came forward to police and said that he recalled picking up a man from a Dallas hotel who strongly resembled David Lewis on February 1st and drove him to the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. And according to the driver, he appeared to be nervous and paid for his ride from a wad of $100 bills. So just to stop here for a moment, I want to help put this in a way that's like slightly easier to understand because these details are extremely important. On January 29th, this was on a Friday, he was seen running through the Southwest Airlines terminal in Amarillo, his hometown where he lived, without any luggage, and then he was seen again by a taxi driver who picked him up from a hotel in Dallas and drove him to the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport on Monday, February 1st, which is the same day he would be killed by a hit-and-run driver all the way up in Moxee, Washington, over 1,000 miles away. And this would also be the same day that he bought those plane tickets that were from Los Angeles to Dallas. So it's also presumed that he would have had to have been home on January 31st, which was a Sunday, for at least enough time to press the record button on the VCR, which also for reference, the kickoff for Super Bowl 27 was at 5:30 local time. So he most likely left like shortly after that.
Yeah. So something I read was that they believed that he hit the record button around 5:15, which would make sense. You want to catch the major things at the beginning of a Super Bowl, the flyover, the national anthem, the coin toss, and what have you, It didn't explain why, but I think they referenced that they saw the video. I wish that the video had been submitted or like preserved as evidence. I think that would put a lot more accurate timestamps on this mystery.
Well, I'm sure it is preserved somewhere, but I think that's a good enough time frame. Like about 5:15. That sounds about right to me.
All right. How he got from Amarillo to Dallas is also not clear, as he left his Ford Explorer in the courthouse parking lot in Amarillo. His wife and daughter apparently just missed him by a few hours. Anyway, In 2002, Amarillo police told the Amarillo Globe News that the plane tickets led them to believe that Lewis went missing on his own accord and that no foul play was suspected in his disappearance. He had seemingly just vanished and didn't want to be found. In the days and years after David disappeared, his family largely speculated that he had met with foul play of some sort. Mrs. Lewis told the Del Rio News-Herald that her husband received death threats when he served as Moore County Court-at-Law judge in Dumas from 1986 to 1990. Or maybe he made an enemy in his practice, she said. In the same article from the Del Rio News-Herald, she pointed to 2 cases as possible, but not likely, places where Lewis might have made enemies. The first was a lawsuit brought by murder convict Bobby Templin against his former father-in-law, Norbert Schlegel of Shamrock. Lewis represented Schlegel in the lawsuit. Templin eventually withdrew. Quote, "I think someone abducted David and killed him," end quote, Schlegel said. But not Templin, who lacks the money and influence to arrange a murder from prison, he said. Quote, "What would be the motive? He wouldn't have gained anything," end quote. The second case Smith has looked into is a $3 million lawsuit brought against Lewis, several other lawyers, and an engine additive promoter Lewis represented. Lewis was the only key party awaiting deposition, and Mrs. Lewis said his files on the case are gone. But his attorney, Thomas Kelly of Dallas, could see no motive here either. No benefits from Lewis's disappearance, he said. Quote, "The last time I spoke to him, he was upbeat," Kelly said. "It's a relatively insignificant case, covered by insurance, no personal liability," end quote.
So also further down in this article, it's noted that Mrs. Lewis refused to take a polygraph test, which caused tension between her and Detective James Smith, who was working on the case full-time in 1993. So I do want to note here that I personally don't read too much into this, seeing as how David was a lawyer and a judge. He probably told his wife never to take a polygraph test, seeing as how they're not admissible in court and they don't serve to help you much, even if you do pass it. So
that would make sense.
Yeah, I don't read too much into that.
Okay.
Police back in 1993 were saying that they were stumped by all the conflicting signs that Lewis was abducted, killed himself, or simply walked away from a high-profile civic and professional life. Quote, "I changed my mind a lot on this," Police Detective James Smith said. "I wake up at 2 a.m. thinking, whatever happened to David Lewis?" End quote. He later added, quote, "It has a lot of earmarkings of suicide. People don't always do what you expect," end quote. Suffice to say, the investigation stalled shortly after it was opened. David seemingly vanished into thin air, and no sign of him was ever found again, until 2004, where our story finally comes full circle, having been conclusively identified as Moxee John Doe, who had been struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver on the cold evening of February 1st in Moxee, Washington. The very same day, he was driven to the Dallas-Fort Worth airport by a taxi driver. He somehow went from one end of the country to the other and was killed by a hit-and-run driver, all in the same calendar day. Police conclude that David had probably disappeared on his own with the purpose of committing suicide. However, his family disagrees with this notion, stating that David would never do something like this, and instead believe that he was kidnapped or met with some sort of foul play. Or perhaps the truth lies elsewhere, perhaps somewhere between both of these two extremes. So let's just summarize real quick. David Glenn Lewis, a respected lawyer, judge, and pillar of his community, disappeared from his home in Amarillo, Texas on Super Bowl Sunday, January 31st, 1993, just hours before his wife and daughter came home from their shopping trip. He had been seen running through the Amarillo airport on the previous Friday without any luggage. He had presumably purchased 2 airline tickets under his own name, the first being Dallas to Amarillo on Sunday, and another ticket on February 1st from Los Angeles to Dallas. David Glenn Lewis vanished for 11 years until the year 2004, when DNA conclusively linked him to a John Doe who had been the victim of a hit and run in the middle of Washington state, just outside of the small town of Moxee. An autopsy confirmed that he was not drunk or on any narcotics at the time. So how did David Glenn Lewis vanish from Amarillo, Texas, and turn up dead in the middle of nowhere on the opposite side of the country in little over 24 hours? Kyle, what are your thoughts on this whole debacle, and what do you think happened to him, man? Go.
So there are a lot of wild theories that have ran through my head covering this. Let's start with the most wild ones because we can get through them quick. One, he was abducted by a UFO and dropped off in the wrong state. That would explain the rapid, transition, and then him walking very dazed and confused in the middle of the highway, in the middle of nowhere, and being hit by a car.
Okay, so hold on. If that's true, why was he seen running through the airport terminal just a couple days prior, and also seen in the Dallas airport?
Why did he buy airplane tickets? Why a lot of things, but also why did he start recording the Super Bowl of his favorite team, make a couple of turkey sandwiches and put them in the fridge? That kind of has all the earmarkings of, I plan to be home today with no one bugging me, and then I got zapped up by a UFO.
Okay, well, fair enough, man. What else? What else you got?
Another one. He had some sort of secret life, that his family did not know about. A lot of times, rich people in power do. Maybe someone found out and they threatened to expose him, and he might have gone out looking for them, and that all went to shit. It's not really much there. Something
I want to know what's your honest opinion about it. Like, what do you think actually happened to him? Do you have like one thing that you're like, I think this is what happened to him?
All right. Actually, that is my strongest one. I think someone might have threatened him to expose him unless he paid them money in person, did something, I don't know, and then they agreed to meet out in middle of nowhere, Washington, keep it all hush hush, But the part of that doesn't add up is he deposited money into his bank account instead of withdrawing. Maybe someone found it out and he didn't have any intention of paying them, and he went out to confront them. Somehow that didn't go right. I don't know why he winds up in fatigues, unless they, someone was trying to hunt a man for sport. But yeah,
you think he's playing like the most dangerous game or whatever. What are they called? What was that book where it's like the most dangerous prey or whatever it's called?
That wasn't a book. That was an Always Sunny episode.
But it was based on a book.
Oh yeah. But yeah. I think
the most dangerous game. I think it was called. Yeah.
I think he might have been the prey. And then and then he escaped his hunters and was walking down the highway in a daze, and then got hit by a car. The most lethal, efficient hunter of them all. Cars take out more deer and wildlife than anything.
There's always a bigger fish.
There is always a bigger fish. Yeah. But no, my best theory is that his secret second life was exposed by someone. They bribed him. They threatened to expose, and he instead took the money that the people demanded. He put it in his own family bank account in case he didn't come back, which he didn't. That's the best I got. What about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with all of that shit that you said, man. I don't think that any of those are the actual truth, man. You lost me for a little bit there, but secret life, maybe, yeah, maybe. But here's what I think happened. So, the police, they seem to believe that David committed suicide, and the family, they believe kind of wholeheartedly that there's no way that David Glenn Lewis would have killed himself. And to be fair, he didn't. Like, it was a car that killed him, right? And here's the thing, man. Family and friends are usually the last or the least likely to know about it if somebody commits suicide. They're the most blind and naive to it. Like, for example, if you found me hanging by my neck in front of my computer with 30 tabs of horrific imagery open with my hand around my wiener, statistically speaking, you might say there's no fucking way. Nate wasn't into that. There's no fucking way. He clearly got Epstein's. When in fact, the average person coming in that doesn't know me, they'd be able to accept it for what it was, which is that I made a fatal attempt at trying to achieve the ultimate orgasm.
Yeah, this is very true.
Just to be clear here, though, I am just joking. So if anyone ever finds my dead body in that state, I was definitely Epstein's. Okay,
definitely.
Yeah, that is not a mystery.
Yeah. Just to backtrack, a quick step. You're right. He didn't kill himself. He was hit by a car. But some people do commit suicide by intentionally wandering into traffic. Or even more specifically, wandering on a dark highway, waiting to be hit by someone, which would make sense why he was wearing fatigues, something to make him harder to spot.
Yeah. So, yeah, I do think that David went out to go commit suicide. And I know a lot of these types of cases that we go over, it seems like I say this a lot. But in this instance, I think that everything points towards that. And so here are my thoughts and my overall theory. So first of all, he chose a time where his wife and his kid would be gone for the entire weekend, and this would give him ample time to prepare. We also have to remember that he was deeply religious, along with the rest of his family. So you got to keep that in mind as well here. He left his watch and his wedding ring on the counter, and this definitely suggests to me that he was leaving those behind as some sort of memento or as like a parting message that he wasn't going to be coming back. He knew at that moment, in my opinion, that he wasn't coming back, not just physically, but it was also kind of this subtle way of telling his wife to move on. The whole running back and forth between Amarillo and Dallas airports, this kind of baffles me, but I think what he did was he purchased tickets for flights that he knew he wasn't going to be on in order to throw off investigators and his family. I think to him, he wanted to just disappear and to not hurt his family, because I don't think that he wanted any of them to know that he wanted to die. So I think that he boarded a flight up to Washington under some other alias. Again, this is pre 9/11. No ID required to purchase tickets or to board a domestic flight.
You don't even need a credit card. You could just pay cash at the counter same day.
Yeah. So, he left his ID and his wallet and all that shit in his Ford Explorer in Amarillo. And then he went on this top secret mission as far as he was concerned. Now, keeping in mind that David was deeply religious and committing suicide is deeply frowned upon and could send you to hell, I think that David opted to just simply put himself in a dangerous situation instead. And it's kind of like this Jesus take the wheel moment, so to speak. Kind of like,
or maybe like a loophole.
Exactly. Like, I'm going to walk down the middle of this highway at night wearing camouflage. And if I die, well, it's not suicide. It just means that God willed it. So I think that this is why he chose to go out the way that he did. I think he was doing some sort of mental gymnastics in his mind to where he believed this wasn't exactly committing suicide. He would just put himself in this extremely dangerous situation, and whatever happens, happens. And man, did it happen.
So then the big lingering question would be, why? Why would he, play that lottery? Play that Jesus lottery of maybe suicide.
Well, I don't know, man. And it's kind of like, it's very common for family members of suicide victims to be like, I don't know what happened. He seemed so normal the prior day, or, they're the most oblivious to the signs of it. And so I don't listen to family members when they talk about suicide victims. Yeah. They're always the last to know that there's something going on.
I agree.
So I don't know why he killed himself. There could be many reasons. He might not have been happy in his marriage or whatever. I don't know.
I like to lean on the second life theory for that one. Just recently, like a month ago or less, it was in the news. Some mayor of some small Georgia town committed suicide because he was a mayor of a tiny town. He was also a reverend at the local church in this tiny town. Once again, pillar of the community, involved in politics, involved in religion and everything else. And then some news outlet discovered photos. On the weekends, he liked to do cross-dressing with his wife, just two of them in the safety of their own home. It was something that they did. Now, why you would take pictures of this and expect them not to hit the internet, I don't know. But the word got out and he killed himself because he couldn't stand the shame. So that's why I like to lean on the second life.
It very well could be. It very well could be. The problem is that we don't know enough about David as a person. There's just not a lot out there about him.
Well, there was no social media back then.
Exactly. So there's nothing we can point to specifically. But I think there was something going on with him to where, for whatever reason, maybe he was just had some chemical imbalance in his brain. Something was going on, and I think that was his choice for how he was going to go out. Just put himself into some dangerous situation and let God take the wheel. And it sounds ridiculous, but I think that was why he chose the way that he chose.
It doesn't sound ridiculous at all. It all mostly adds up, except for how do you pick a highway in the middle of Moxee, Washington?
Well, okay, so I think that the reason he chose the furthest away place where he had no connections to go there and just start walking down some lonely highway, because when they find him dead on the side of the road, they're not going to know who the fuck this guy is. They're never going to, in his mind, they're never going to identify him. And I don't think that his family, I don't think he wanted his family to ever know that he killed himself. I think he would have rather just disappeared, just vanished into thin air, than let his family know that he intentionally killed himself.
Do you think there might have been a life insurance policy aspect to this?
Oh God, I didn't even think of that. But maybe.
Because rich people can afford really expensive insurance, really high payouts, and I don't think you get that payout if you kill yourself.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know if you can get the life insurance policy if you just disappear, though.
Well, I think after maybe X number of months or years, you are legally claimed dead if you've been missing that whole time.
But I just wonder if there's some clause in the policy where it's if we don't know where you are or how you died, we can't prove that you died under all of the covered ways of dying,
Well, that's a fair point. But you gotta remember, this guy was a lawyer and a judge. He could have, tweaked his own policy because you understand that foreign language that is legal jargon.
That's true. No, you could be right, man. But I think that the most likely case here is that he didn't want his family to know that he did this.
Yeah. And I agree. Why is still up in the air.
Yeah, we just don't know enough about what was going on in his personal life. I mean, from the outside, everything seemed normal, but I think on the inside there was something going on. We just don't know what it is.
All right, I think we're gonna mark this one as suicide. Why unknown?
So you're gonna backtrack on what you thought originally?
Oh yeah. I was just throwing out wild things because those are the wild ideas that came in my head, and I thought they'd be fun to share.
All right, man. Well, do you have any apologies, shout outs, or clarifications to make before we go?
I would like to give a big shout out to Irina for letting Caitlin and I crash at her place while we're starting our new life in this new state. And as we get ready to ruin this new state, new city with our shithead California ways.
Yeah. Today, I'd like to just apologize to our non-California-based listeners on, your behalf, Kyle, for ruining their town by driving badly, driving up the cost of living, and voting for the same failed policies that ruined California. But like I said, they did it to us, and so it's our turn to return the favor. Payback's a bitch.
I'm not going to apologize for that. So thank you for doing that for me.
You're welcome. All right, man, I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there, somewhere in the ether, and through our powers combined, we'll solve that sumbitch once and for all.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
Yeah, and okay, the average cost of any single family home in San Diego has now topped $1 million, and we just beat out the entire country for most expensive place to live. More expensive than San Fran, more expensive than New York, everywhere. San Diego is now numero uno.
Fuck, dude, that sucks. I hope the housing market crashes, man.
There was an article that came out yesterday. Someone is renting a tent in their backyard in OB for $900 a month.
A fucking tent?
Yeah. It's on Craigslist. It's a pretty big tent, but it's a tent. It's a tent in someone's backyard in OB for $900 a month. And it's probably about the cheapest rent you can find in San Diego for anything.
How do they shit?
I don't know. That's not my problem.
Do they shit in a bucket?
Yeah, probably. It's OB.
I mean, they don't have like an outdoor bathroom for the tenant to use?
Probably not. Yeah,
or a porta potty?
That
porta potty
900 doesn't include utilities.
Why would you pay $900 a month to live in a tent when you can just pitch a tent on the sidewalk?
Well, because
like everyone else is doing.
They made it illegal.
Okay, go up to Los Angeles and on Skid Row. You can do it up there for free.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I don't know, man.